followed by a moment of silent reflection. Please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The next item is public hearings, and we have none. So we'll move on to the consent agenda. The consent agenda is a motion to adopt the consent agenda, finalizes the proposed action for the meeting. The following items are A, February 28th, 2024 regular council minutes, B, February 28th, 2024 closed session council minutes, and C, list of claims dated March 6th, 2024. Are there any questions or discussion? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion. Motion by Mr. Cassidy, second by Ms. Riccio. Is there any further discussion? All right, please proceed to vote. And that passes unanimously. Next up is audience comments, agenda and non-agenda items. The presiding officer will limit speaking time for non-agenda items to 1 minute and items noticed on the agenda to 5 minutes. Ms. Hefter, do we have anyone wishing to speak? We have 2 people. We do have 2. First up is Peggy Breister, who wishes to speak on Resolution 3786, opponent and otherwise. Thank you, Ms.
Yeah, I suppose opponent is probably more accurate, but the reason I wanted to speak today was really just a question, because the revised ordinance says 80 decibels with the intention not to carry more than 100 to 150 feet from the broadcast point. And in checking what's called a distance attenuation calculator, the things I've learned in looking into some of this, if you are at 80 decibels at 100 feet, at 1,000 feet, you're at 60. So noise does not drop off at 100, 150 feet. So maybe I'm misreading the ordinance or misunderstanding the intent of the ordinance, but it doesn't make sense to me to say that at 100 or 150 feet, it's that the noise is not going to carry beyond that if you're at 80. So I question that. I do think that, I know the intent of this was just, when this was first introduced, it was introduced as a way to just update some ordinances. But I think the city's noise ordinance is not very complete. It is not, there's a lot of things that go into noise ordinances, and just the decibel level alone and how that is worded with it not making sense. And again, I may be misunderstanding it. I think that I guess I would hope that the city might take a little bit more time with this, because it is an important issue to all residents of the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Breister. And then we also have Ann Wagner, who wishes to also speak on Ordinance 3786, listed as otherwise.
I am speaking tonight to make clarification or explanation of record to Ordinance 3786, amending Chapter.
Excuse me, Ms. Wagner, could you please try speaking a little more into the mic? Sorry, we're having trouble hearing you up here.
I am speaking tonight to make clarification or explanations of record to Ordinance 3786, amending Chapter 500-4 and documentation posted online relative to the City Council meeting of March 13th, 2024, namely City Attorney Huffman's memo of 3/5/2024 to City Manager Moore and the City Council, and the proposed ordinance number 3786. This memo and ordinance revision by adding a Y to 8 is misleading to the public and city records as to ordinance changes to noise limits, and simply untrue as to correcting a typographical error as to decibels. There is no typographical error in original Chapter 500, subsection 500-4, paragraphs B 1 through 6. The rule or format for numbers, both in journalism and legal documents, is numbers 1 through 9 are written out in alphabetic form and multiple digit numbers are written in numeric form. This is noted in paragraph B3 as 19 for 19 as to watts and 100 and 150 numerically as to distance. If 8, which was written out in line 2, was originally intended to be 80, it would have been in numeric form, 80, not alphabetic. 8 in the original paragraph B3 was not a typographical error, and by adding a Y to it to accommodate the revision is misleading to the general public as to revision of the code. Through numerous county committee meetings and several city council meetings, it is apparent that the city wishes to increase the decibel limit to accomplish permitted noise limits for the newly approved permanent stage at the Fond du Lac County Fairgrounds and possible other city venues. This should be noted of record as to the reason for the change and not masqueraded as correcting a typographical error which does not exist. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wagner. And with that, that ends our audience comments. So next we'll move on to action items. Action item A is change of agent, Class A intoxicating and Class A fermented malt license, Corporation Walgreens Corporation, agent name Carol Howe, agent address 125 River Hills Drive, Fond du Lac, doing business as Walgreens number 10927, address 20 West Pioneer Road, Fond du Lac, and our introduction is by our city clerk, Ms. Hefter.
Thank you, Vice President Brault. Walgreens at 20 West Pioneer Road is requesting a standard agent change for their Class A intoxicating liquor and Class A beer license. Background checks were done on the proposed agent, Carol Howe, and city staff recommends approval.
Thank you, Ms. Hefter. Are there any questions or discussion? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. Mullen and second by Mr. Cassidy. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please proceed to vote. And that passes unanimously. Item B is Class B fermented malt license and Class C wine license, limited liability company TTAK LLC, agent Todd Lissau, home address W4660 Alice Way, doing business as Anjanetti's, location of premises 7 14th Street, and again, our introduction is by Ms. Hefter.
Thank you again. Todd Lizaway, agent for TTAK LLC, is requesting a Class B fermented malt and Class C wine license for Anjanetti's, located at 7 14th Street. Background checks were done on the proposed agent and officers. City staff and Alcohol License Committee recommend approval.
Are there any questions for Ms. Hefter? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. Zimmerman, second by Ms. Ricchio. Any further questions or discussion? Seeing none, please proceed to vote. And that passes unanimously. Item C, Class A intoxicating liquor and Class A fermented malt license, limited liability company Balaji LLC, agent Johnny Patel, home address 1136 Deer Run, Fond du Lac, doing business as Phillies on 4th, location of premises 321 4th Street, and again, our introduction is by our city clerk, Ms. Hefter.
Thank you again. Johnny Patel is applying for a Class A intoxicating liquor and Class A fermented malt license for Philly on 4th Street at 321 4th Street. Background checks were also done on the agent and officers, and city staff and Alcohol License Committee recommend approval.
Are there any questions for Ms. Hefter? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion. Motion by Ms. Ricchio.
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Zimmerman. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, please proceed to vote. And that passes unanimously. Item D, Class B fermented malt license, limited liability company Pub 23 LLC, agent Himat Dillon, home address N6383 Tradewind Circle, Beaver Dam, doing business as Pub 23, location of premises 919 East Johnson Street. And again, our introduction is by our city clerk, Ms. Hefter.
Thank you again. Pub 23 LLC is applying for a Class B fermented malt license for on-premises sales at 919 East Johnson Street. State statutes has restrictions on limitations of other businesses, and therefore the proposed area would need to be a completely separate area. City staff and Alcohol License Committee recommend approval with the following conditions. The Class B licensed establishment must have a completely separate premises description from all other licensed establishments and comply with all relevant provisions of Wisconsin Statutes Chapter 125 and the Code of the City of Fond du Lac. Separate premises must include the following. The two businesses cannot be physically connected other than an emergency exit. The two businesses must be completely walled off from one another. Customers cannot easily go back and forth between the two businesses while consuming alcohol. There are separate outside entrances to each of the two businesses. There are separate counters at each location that can specifically monitor the requirements of each separate license. The applicant must submit a site plan to the City of Fond du Lac Inspections Department showing said premises descriptions. The property must pass all inspections with the City of Fond du Lac Inspections, Fire Department, and County Health Department, and obtain an occupancy permit.
Thank you, Ms. Hefter. Are there any questions? Mr. Cassidy?
If we, like a pending approval, and then they go and they meet the standards that were,
Correct. They haven't started any construction, so they want to make sure they can obtain a license before they make an investment with construction.
all right, so if we vote and it passes, then if they meet these criteria, then they will get their license.
Correct. We
Without
will not,
another vote.
right. We will not issue the license until they meet all these restrictions and obtain an occupancy permit.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Cassidy. Are there any other questions? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. Mullen. And second by Ms. Ricchio. I just do want to clarify with Ms. Hoffman, if we make the motion to approve, are we approving the conditional?
So your motion to approve is accepting the recommendation of the Alcohol Licensing Committee with all of those restrictions. So it's pulling all of those conditions into the approval.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or discussion? Seeing none, please proceed to vote. And that passes unanimously. Thank you. Next, we'll move on to item E, resolution number 9109, a resolution extending tax incremental district TID 10 to support affordable housing. And our introduction is our Director of Administration, Ms. Davy.
So it is time for us to close TID 10. So when a TID reaches its maximum life, or when the tax increment received has been enough to pay the expenses of the TID is required to be terminated. But before the TID is terminated, we have the ability to extend it for up to 1 year and transfer that last year of increment into an affordable housing fund. In 2021, we created an affordable housing fund and have been adopting extension resolutions for all the TIDs that we've closed since then. To date, there's about $700,000 in that fund. Adopting the affordable housing resolution for TID 10 will add another $1.7 million to that fund, which will give us a great pool of funds to assist with housing stock and affordable housing modifications that we need to make. So I am happy to answer any questions you may have about this resolution.
Are there any questions for Ms. Davy? Ms. Ricchio.
Thank you, thank you. So that 1.7 million,
Ms. Ricchio, could you please move your mic a little bit closer?
I thought I was naturally very loud.
Thank you.
So the money in the existing one and then the 700,000 that we can transfer in the extension, how does that fund get dispersed? How does affordable housing get created? By whom?
So we have a study that is out there right now, and they will make some recommendations in that study. We will put budget dollars into our annual budget, which will come before council for any plans or anything we'd want to spend that money on.
Okay, and we're looking at probably the next budget year for that.
A couple
Some of
budget,
it,
some, maybe, yeah, it's possible.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? I do have one question. Is there any limit on how long those funds can sit before they need to be spent for housing, or is it however long the city needs to take?
It's however long we need.
Okay, thank you. All right, seeing no other questions, I will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. Mullen, seconded by Ms. Ricchio. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, please proceed to vote. And that passes with Mr. Cassidy voting no. Next, we'll move on to item F, resolution number 9110, tax incremental district TID 10, termination and authorization to distribute excess increment to overlying taxing districts. Again, our introduction is by our Director of Administration, Ms. Davy.
Thank you again. So now we're on to the actual termination of the TID. This TID was created in 2004 to create the South Business Park, which is also known as the Fox Ridge Business Park. There are currently 5 businesses that have built facilities within the TID, and that would not have happened without the creation of this TID back in 2004. When the tax, like as I said before, when the tax increment generated by the TID has been enough to pay off the expenses, we're required by the Department of Administration to close out this TID. Terminating this particular TID will return tax increment value of $89 million to the general property tax base for the city, which will be effective with January 1st of this year. So adopting the termination resolution will allow me to file appropriate paperwork with the Department of Revenue, schedule the final TID audit, and then return any excess increment to the various taxing jurisdictions. And I'm happy to answer any questions on this one.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. Davy? Ms. Ricchio?
I only have a comment. Excellent investment. Kudos to the 2004 city staff and council that approved that. Could you just refresh me as to what geographical area that comprises?
There was a map included with the agenda, Maggie, if you can.
I'm talking like for everybody, just the south part of this, the park, the south park.
South, yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion. Motion by Mr. Cassidy.
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Zimmerman. Is there any further questions or discussion? Seeing none, please proceed to vote. And that passes unanimously. Next, we'll move on to item G, ordinance number 3786, an ordinance amending chapter 500-4, loudspeakers and amplifying systems of the code of the city of Fond du Lac. And our introduction is our city attorney, Ms. Hoffman.
Thank you. I've brought back in front of you, this was part of our code cleanup, and I can assure the council that there was no intent to masquerade or be tricky with this. It was simply that someone noticed that it said 8, and when the research was done, 8 would be a whisper. So it seemed unlikely that we meant nothing louder than a whisper, and it seemed likely that we had somehow a 0 had gotten dropped. And that is it. There was no other intent, just so we're clear. So the two things that the ordinance that I'm bringing in front of you does is, one is allows the city clerk to issue the loudspeaker permits, which has been our practice. We haven't been having everything come to city council. So it would be making our code reflect our practice. And then the other was cleaning 8 to 80. And that was it. That was all that was happening in the ordinance change.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. Hoffman? Mr. Mullen?
So we just have those two things that we're actually cleaning up in the code, but in the intervening time, and actually for a while now, there's been a lot of interest from the public related to the fairgrounds. And just so I have this straight, the fairgrounds is a county facility, and so the fair board basically decides what, when, how they're going to run events at the fairground. And the ordinance, our ordinance specifically exempts them from sound restrictions during the week of the fair.
That's
correct. Okay, so therefore, our ordinance really only sets kind of the outer limits of what they can do. They can't put on a midnight concert because the noise would leak out, and that would violate our ordinance.
other than the week of the fair. There's no restriction on the week of the fair.
Right, but
But otherwise, yes.
right, but
The other week.
otherwise, you know, if they wanted to do like a Rocky Horror Picture Show or something at midnight on Halloween, they wouldn't, you know, if there was
Correct.
too much noise, they would be in violation. All right. Okay, so I believe there's, and I've heard a lot of public support for adding a Sunday night restriction. I believe the Fair Board is aware of that as well. And so that's something that's been discussed. You know, members of the public have come to us and asked for that. I just want to say that we need to be careful in considering this because we don't really control the fair. We just set the limits, but we do control what happens downtown. And even though I haven't heard a lot from downtown businesses, how, you know, that any restriction on Sunday night would be detrimental to their operations, we should probably consider that before acting on this. So kind of the way I see it is we either trust the Fair Board to not do anything that will upset the neighbors, or we try to impose a limit on them, but the perhaps unintended consequence would be to some other businesses in town. So is that, am I correct so far?
Yes, though it depends how you make your amendment. Right now, our code basically deals with loudspeakers that move and loudspeakers that don't move.
Right.
So if you create a third category for fairgrounds loudspeakers, then you could Sunday night limit just the fairgrounds loudspeakers and not have an effect on the rest of the city's loudspeakers.
Well, that was kind of my question. Is there a way, because I do want to accommodate the people that live around the fair. Is there a way to, and I was thinking of this, either create a kind of a fair district where there would be a restriction on Sunday night and maybe not for the downtown
Yeah.
venues that might need to do something? Or conversely, specifically exempt the downtown area from Sunday night restrictions?
It wouldn't just be downtown, because there's also like the Ball Diamonds and.
Yes, of
There's other
course.
areas that may
Okay,
have amplified sound on a Sunday.
so one possible path to basically protecting or accommodating the neighbors of the fairground and the other people who may want to have loudspeakers would be to create like a fair zone. Can we do that?
Yeah. Mhm. I mean, we've already got the language of where you mean when you're talking about the fairgrounds. You just say, obviously not the week of the fair, but the other times of the year, nothing on Sunday nights, or, you know, whatever you come up with, whatever your limitation is that you want to have.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Ms. Ricchio. Oh,
Yes, thank you. So if we were going to vote right this minute on this, we would be voting on the loudspeakers being permanent or temporary. That's all that's in this ordinance. That's the only change on the ordinance before us right now.
That's the existing ordinance. The only changes in front of you are allowing the clerk to issue the loudspeaker permits and changing the 8 to 80. Those are the only two changes we're making in the existing ordinance, which has been part of the city's code the entire time I've been with the city.
So to piggyback off what Mr. Mullen was bringing up, if we made an amendment tonight that said just the fairgrounds or anywhere in the city has to be done at 8 o'clock, does the county-owned fairgrounds have to abide by our city ordinance? 8 o'clock on Sundays or 6 o'clock on Sundays. Does the county board fairgrounds have to abide by our city ordinance?
Yes, the loudspeaker noise, we have the ability, under our ability to protect our citizens, health, safety, and welfare, we can regulate noise, even the noise that's coming from the fairgrounds.
So I see what's before us tonight to pass or not the decibel change to the ordinance. And we could add another amendment to the ordinance, carving out times of operation.
Yes, you can add amendments to the ordinance tonight.
Okay. But what if, the fairgrounds per se, and most outside events only happen in the summer. So I'm still not understanding the insistence to have these events stop at 6 p.m. or 8 p.m. Because like I said last week, we don't all work from 8 to 5 Monday through Friday. There's people that think Sunday night is still the weekend. And we're trying to bring in young people, young families. And these events are what they're attracted to. So I feel like that would be exclusionary. So I'm happy tonight to vote on the decibel thing. And I don't have any restrictive amendments to propose personally.
Okay, Mr. Heisler has a question.
He's asking Ms. Hoffman, for those of us who may be in favor of what Mr. Mullen was discussing, would we need to amend things tonight? He'd very much be in favor of the fair area restriction that Mr. Mullen was referring to.
I mean, it's your meeting, and you certainly could make an amendment tonight, or you can direct me to work on one and bring it back to you at the next meeting.
All right, thank you. Mr. Zimmerman.
Thank you, Ms. Broadwell. I really like that idea. But I just want to speak, I guess, for the young people here. I live on 18th and Bruce. I mean, I'm right in between Buttermilk and the county fairgrounds. And I have talked to a lot of incredible neighbors in my area who think that we have jurisdiction over the fairgrounds, which we don't. I've had to, inform them that. A lot of it is they just want to find a middle ground on Sundays. Sunday is a family day. Even for a 32-year-old guy like myself, my wife and I like to go outside and grill and just sit outside and enjoy our neighborhood. And a lot of kids go to summer school. Most people work on Monday mornings. So they say, hey, we don't care about Friday, we don't care about Saturday, but Sunday, can we wrap this up at a reasonable time? Now, I think the real discussion for us to have is nobody can figure out what the reasonable time is. I think we're stuck between 8 and 6. And I'm not going to die on either hill. I think both are feasible. But, so I'm really in favor. I was in favor of the amendment, but actually we've always been about slowing down the process and doing it right. So I would be all for giving it to Ms. Hoffman to spend some time on it and bring it back to us. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Zimmerman. We have some questions from Mr. Schisler. Oh, sorry. Okay, just more of a comment. Mr. Schisler would like to see this come back at the next meeting, and I'll just add that Mr. Heisler also added a similar item. Just for those of you who aren't aware, we've had some sound difficulties, so they're communicating via chat. Next, we have Ms. Riccio.
My last comment on this will be, I don't think that we need to do anything except vote on the changes before us in the ordinance and to direct or request Ms. Hoffman to go back and work on something that's very ambiguous. I say, let's give this a chance to happen in the community. You know, let's make sure the county has our input on the design. Let's make sure that they're gonna have a sound engineer. I don't see the need for any action at all besides what we're voting on tonight regarding the speaker. So to send you back to do something, I would want to spell that out carefully as to what it is we're sending you back to do, not just go back and bring something to another meeting. We have to narrow that down. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mullen?
That is kind of my question. It seems like there's a consensus, or at least a majority, of wanting to do something around the fairgrounds. Would it make more sense to pass the ordinance cleanup tonight and then amend it, direct you to come back with language? Because I don't feel comfortable kind of trying to put together language right here, and then amend that next week, or next meeting, on the amendment.
The city manager had a comment.
Mr. Mullen, I was thinking along those same lines. If you concluded this action tonight, we could bring back things under input next time so that everyone can have a chance to sort of grade our work, right?
Okay.
We're going to bring some text back so you have something to look at, because right now I think you've got a little bit of a challenge because you don't have anything before you, and
Right.
so if you could see sort of what's in the code that I'm looking at right now and what it might look like, we could give you some options to look at that would be separate from this action tonight.
Right, so that was my question was, does it make more sense to pass those changes in the ordinance tonight? The clerk can approve permits instead of city council, which is what we've been doing, and the 8 going to 80, and get that out of the way, and then address this other issue separately.
And if it comes back under input next time, then you don't feel
Right.
squeezed, right? You've got to change.
Well, and it gives the public a chance to kind of put some input.
Right.
All right, with that, I'd like to make a motion to pass ordinance 3786 with the understanding that the topic of a restriction around the fairground will be an input item next time.
All right, motion by Mr. Mullen, second by Ms. Ricchio. Are there any other questions or discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I would just like to add, since I didn't really add my thoughts on this, that I agree that looking at just a sound limit for the fairgrounds seems like probably the best solution to try to deal with some of the concerns with the neighbors, but also not limit events that might be happening in other parts of the city. So I really appreciate that this is a direction that we seem to have some consensus, and so I'm looking forward to seeing what we might have for next meeting. So with that, please proceed to vote. And that passes unanimously. Thank you. And with that, that ends our action items. So next will be the presentation of input items. Item A is a development agreement for 183 South Main Street, presented by our Community Development Director, Ms. Benson.
Thank you, Ms. Brault. There are times where the city will look to invest in various projects to further redevelopment. So you'll think about the TIF we did for the Fees parking lot, and for the investment we did in the Retlaw Hotel. And this is another project where the Beer Nuts building that we previously discussed about is really been underutilized, underinvested. And we have a small-scale developer who's looking to do something, create somewhere around 6 to 8 residential units, as well as some commercial space on Main Street. And so as part of that effort to help facilitate that redevelopment, we'd be looking to invest $200,000 in the project. The developer is investing about $1.4 million for the renovation of that building. And we're actually arranging it more as like a forgivable loan. And so that way we have some accountability over about a 5-year period if all the benchmarks are met. And so it would be forgiven on an annual basis based on the commercial tenants, $1,000 if it's a more of a professional service. An accountant, lawyers, no disrespect, $2,000 if it's an experience generator, retail, restaurant, axe throwing, crafty, those kind of things that bring people to the downtown and activate the main street. And then we're also looking at doing $6,000 per residential unit because we've talked about the importance of housing. We've talked about the ability of having spaces not only that are affordable, but also for our young professionals who may not qualify for our affordable housing, but still are looking for other opportunities, wanting to be in the downtown. And this has a secondary effect. In addition to adding our residential housing stock, we're really enhancing the downtown. Because what's the best way to support our downtown and the businesses down there is have residential existing there. Because they're going to shop downtown, they're going to eat downtown. And so it's a win-win for the city. We get a building that will increase in value to almost $800,000 to $900,000, almost doubling the tax that they'll be paying. In addition, we'll be increasing the number of residential individuals that will be down in the downtown and enhancing the business improvement district. So at the end of the day, it is a worthwhile investment, and we would be bringing in the actual development agreement to you at your next meeting for actual formal action, but here to answer any questions about the project.
Thank you, Ms. Benson. Are there any questions from council? Oh, Ms. Ricchio.
Yes, Ms. Benson. This, in my vernacular, it's the 4th and Main, the Brickles building.
Yes, that's correct.
And he has yet no intention of how he's going to remodel the downstairs for what type of downstairs business he's got?
So there's going to be about 700, 800 square feet of commercial tenant space. And so imagine you're a small business entrepreneur. Are you going to sign a lease when you can't open your business for a year? No, you're not. And so the space is going to be for a commercial tenant. So which actual tenant is moving in, we'll know that a little bit closer to the completion of the project, because no small business is going to financially and legally bind themselves to a space that is yet to be built.
Right. So that's what I'm saying.
Yes.
That's yet to be determined.
Yes.
Also then, where does this money come from, this $200,000 in our budget? Where is it?
Sure. Under the community development budget, we have a brownfield that we talked about. And so this building actually has a significant amount of asbestos that needs to be abated, as well as some lead-based paint. And so it does fall within the category of a brownfield. And so that's what these dollars are for, that perception of those buildings that would not really appeal to most other individuals to tackle.
Is there adequate parking there for 6 to 8 residents upstairs?
Despite the fact that we have a lot of wonderful parking in the downtown, we manage 21 parking lots in the city, that does have its own private parking lot behind the building.
I'm aware of that parking lot, but is
And it does, yes. In addition, there are 2 parking lots across the way that the city owns and operates.
So in this same field, what's the status of the development at the old Statesons or Dillinger's on Division and Main? That we're investing in that property?
Sure, that will be the food hall.
I'm sorry?
That's the food hall.
What's the status of that? Like,
Ms. Ricchio, that item actually is not on our agenda, so I think we should limit our discussion to the property listed on the
I'm
agenda.
curious, before we invest again in downtown, what's happening to the money we've already invested and will invest in the old Stateson's property? I think that's the same conversation.
We can add that to the agenda for next week
Okay,
if you'd
please add
like.
that to the agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ricchio. Mr. Mullen?
Well, I think this is great. To save an old building at that location in downtown that has been kind of neglected ever since I moved here, I think is a win. We get to boost our tax base. The money that we are investing in this, we will make that back in, I figured, around 10 years, maybe a little less in terms of incremental tax value. So that's a win for the city. And then after that, we're making money. We get to create some housing. Plus, for the first few years, the developer is going to have $6,000 per unit that doesn't, that's 500 a month. I mean, that should give him a little wiggle room to keep his rents low enough that he can fill that. So I think that's good. Everything about this is just a win. So, and I like the way it's, their kind of benchmarks and things that they have to do to get this money. And, I just want to remind everybody, this is about $1.4 million project that the day it's done, he's only going to be able to sell it for 800 or 900. So he really has a lot of skin in the game, so to speak. So I'm very happy about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Schisler has a question.
He's asking, does this agreement set precedents that others proposing the same or similar thing would receive city support of this kind?
No.
Thank you. Mr. Cassidy.
From a practical standpoint, abating any asbestos is a hindrance to development in itself. And the fact that we are going to be able to get rid of that, that will just open that up even more. So I am fully behind this thing.
Thank you. Ms. Ricchio.
Okay, I am absolutely for this development, and I love that building, and I can see all the value that the city will get from it and the people will get from it. I'm wondering, though, is one of the benchmarks or criteria, does it have anything to do with affordable rent? Like, is he going to be putting luxury units up there? Or because we're interested in housing for, I don't know, what market is he looking at to house up there?
So we need housing on all levels. We've just opened up 62 affordable units. And we already have a number of individuals within this community who make more money that they don't qualify for that development. And so if we focus solely on affordable as defined by the state through their financial mechanisms, we are excluding individuals. I think if you would ask the chief of police, he would have probably a number of officers that would not be able to find housing in that development because they don't meet the income requirements. So what this development does is really more of a market rate, and we'll have some opportunities for those individuals who make more money than the affordable housing, but probably will not be what I would consider high-end luxury apartment units.
Okay, well, I'm not even thinking really like Section 8 housing or in that, I'm not thinking low-income housing, but I'm thinking, 1,000, 1,100 a month.
Yes, yep. Usually the downtown units are rent out somewhere between 800 to 1,000.
Thank you. But my question is that specified in the benchmarks? Is that part of the criteria for getting this? Do we have any impact on how he's going to rent those out, or to whom, or to what
No.
income level? Okay, just want to know. Thank you.
Thank you. Did we have any other questions in the chat at all? No. Seeing no other questions, I just wanted to add to Ms. Ricchio's point. As Ms. Benson said, we do need housing at all levels, not just the most affordable. And if it ends up being a very desirable location downtown, I don't think the city should be limiting, where that rent falls. So I wouldn't want to see that in the agreement. But I just want to echo some of the comments that I'm very excited to see this happening, that the city can be involved in helping renovate a property, as Mr. Cassidy said, especially with asbestos and lead paint. Those are some major problems that can lead to health concerns. So if we can see that taken care of in one of our downtown buildings and make it better, that's a pretty cool thing, I think. So I'm looking forward to seeing this come back to us at our next meeting.
Thank you.
Mr. Heisler does have a comment.
He says, Ms. Benson, this is a slam dunk in my opinion. I appreciate the forgivable loan aspect of the way this has been proposed. As someone who lives downtown and who doesn't qualify for affordable housing, I think anytime we can add units to our fantastic downtown, it will have my support.
All right, thank you to Mr. Heisler for that. And seeing no other discussion, that ends our input items. Thank you, Ms. Benson. And with that, at this time, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion by Mr. Zimmerman. Second by Mr. Mullen. This is not debatable. Please proceed to vote. And that passes unanimously. We are adjourned.